In they come. Eduardo, why don't you go ahead and switch over to the next slide so people can see that as they're coming in. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started really quickly. We're expecting a very large group, so I'm going to give it until 11:01 for everybody to come in. But in the meantime, here's a couple of housekeeping notes that you can take a look at. Thank you, James, for jumping right on, getting yourself introduced in the chat, leading the way for everyone else. Okay, I know we have a lot of people that are still going to come on, but we're going to at least go ahead and get started with some of the housekeeping. We have a tremendous amount of information to cover today, and I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for questions. So I will introduce myself. I'm Terry Ball. I am the grants manager for Californians for the Arts, working on this grant program. We are very pleased to have all of you here today. My pronouns are she, her, and y'all. And I am coming to you from the unceded lands of the Chumash people in Santa Barbara, California. We're representing here today both Californians for the Arts and Californians Arts Advocates. There we go. California Arts Advocates is the lobbying portion, the lobbying organization where we actually fight for resources like these. I will explain now that I am standing in for Julie, who is the CEO of these two organizations, who could not be here with us this morning. So I'm a little rusty on this portion of the presentation, but I promise it'll pick up after this. So California Arts Advocates is the lobbying organization that fights for resources like this grant program and many others. They have a lobbyist employed to work and excuse me, let's just all take a break. All right. We have a lobbyist employed and work to make sure the arts, culture, and creative industries and workforce are represented in state government. Californians for the Arts is then the 501c3 service organization that works to help you take advantage of the resources that have been fought for California Arts Advocates, as well as many other things. I invite you to visit the California for the Arts website, both to find resources about this grant, but also all of the other wonderful services that Californians for the Arts provides. We are partnered today with, oh, yes, thank you. This is a quote from the president of Californians for the Arts and the California Arts Advocates, Victoria Hamilton. And the point of this is to remind everyone that the only way we make progress is through advocacy, and the only way advocacy is effective is if all of our voices are involved. We are extremely grateful for everyone who was involved in helping fight for this grant program and continues to fight for the importance of funding for the arts and small businesses here in California. These efforts continue. One of the big efforts that's going on right now is for SB 1116, and so we appreciate everyone who is supporting that effort and hope that that support will continue. I'm now going to introduce Jan from our partners at California Nonprofits.
Thanks, Terry. I'm Jan Masok. I'm the CEO of the California Association of Nonprofits, which we call Cal Nonprofits for short. I think we do have a slide after this, if we can advance to that slide. And I wanted to say that, we were very happy and pleased and proud to be partnering with Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates and a lot of other organizations. I see the California Association of Museums is on today's call, and the Association of California Symphony Orchestras we've also worked very closely with in terms of getting funding like this available to nonprofits. And we at Cal Nonprofits also advocate for many other parts of the nonprofit community, as well as those things that help all nonprofits but are not necessarily specific to one. So one very big example is we recently were successful after 4 years of getting a bill passed to regulate online donation programs like PayPal and GoFundMe, programs that all of us kind of use without thinking much about them. But this bill will help make sure that the money actually does get to the nonprofits for which it's been designated. So those are the kinds of things we work on, as well as a wide variety of educational webinars. So I hope that in addition to joining Californians for the Arts and AXO, or the other art support organizations, CAM, that you also consider becoming one of the 10,000 members of Cal Nonprofits. And I just wanted to say a special kind of shout out and thanks and salute or hats off or whatever is the right terminology here for Californians for the Arts, and Terry Ball in particular, who is, this must be Terry's, I don't know, 300th or 400th webinar on various grants programs for the arts. And not only that, we know that everybody that we refer to her gets top first class kind of responsiveness and understanding the situation, and also going to bat for them. So those just such important things. And so I'm happy to be here along with Patrice Ross and other folks from Lendistry, the administrator for this program. And all of us are going to be lurking and answering questions in the Q&A. So looking forward to doing that. And Terry, if you don't mind, if there's something that we might end up actually interrupting you and say, hey, wait a minute, here's a relevant question. But I also know you have we could do this for 3 hours, and we're going to do it in 1. So thanks, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words and for that excellent introduction. As Jan said, we are, and I want to point out, we don't seem to have gotten Jan's slide in. This deck will be posted to the California for the Arts website, and we will include that deck before we post this to the website. All right, so as Jan said, we're going to move quickly. I am not going to go over every single slide. This entire deck will be available for you. The application guide that this slide deck is based on is available on the Californian Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant Program website, which is referenced here at the bottom of the page. I just want to give you a little bit of background so we understand who the players are. The legislature passes a piece of legislation that in this case creates the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grants Program. It has been designated to a state agency, the California Office of the Small Business Advocate, to run the program. They are the ultimate authority. And they then partner with Lendistry to actually administer the program. So Lendistry is who you will be dealing with directly for your application and everything. We do have some representatives from them here today helping us answer questions. Lendistry then reaches out to a group of community partners who you see listed here and who Jen referenced. We are here to help get the word out into the field, to help liaison between Lendistry and the community, and to provide you with technical support. Once we get actually into the application phase, then Californians for the Arts is the lead technical support. So if you leave here with nothing else, leave here with the websites that we've talked about and my email, which we'll put up on the screen. I just want to say one more time, all of this resource will be available for you after the webinar. You do not feel like you have to take pictures or scribble quickly. Take in the information, know that there will be written resources, and one of those is my email. So whatever questions you have, it's been dropped right there. You can direct them to me afterwards if we don't get things covered today. All right, let's move on. Okay, so the basic plan is I'm going to go over this application guide and I'm going to hit the highlights. Do not consider that this is your full information preparation before the grants open. Take the time to go download the resource guide and come back over this application, this slide deck, and read everything. It will give, Lendistry has worked really hard to create some invaluable resources for you. This application guide will show you every question that is going to be on the application. It shows you pictures of the application. So no, you can't get into the application before the portal opens, but you can avail yourself of seeing and reading about every single thing you're going to be asked to do. Please do put your questions in the Q&A instead of chat. One of the things we'll do at the end is compile that into a document, and it's a whole lot easier for us to follow all the questions if they stay in the Q&A instead of in the chat. Okay, let's move on. All right, so a very quick overview. This program, grants are available for eligible nonprofit performing arts organizations, both full 501c3 and fiscally sponsored organizations. There is a list, as you see here, of allowable expenses. Because many people are aware that this is designed as a workforce development grant, there is a lot of misunderstanding about the allowable expenses. These expenses include, as you will see in number 4, other operating expenses. So they do not have to be exclusively used for employees. There's the full list here of what you can use. These grants are made of a set amount. So it's a $250,000 grant, or it's a $50,000 grant, or it's a $75,000 grant. And we will show you the chart. You're going to look at your 2019 gross revenue reported on your 2019 990, and that's going to tell you what the size of your grant will be if you are awarded. The application portal opens July 13th at 9 a.m. All right, let's move on. Okay, so before we go through everything, I'm going to head off some of the pertinent questions at the pass. One is, as I mentioned, you can be a fiscal sponsor, a fiscally sponsored organization, or your own 501c3, and we'll go through the details. Another really important one, you are not required to have employees to be eligible for this grant, not in 2019 and not presently. That is not one of the eligibility requirements. On the application, you're going to find that they're going to ask you some questions about number of workers, number of jobs retained. These are for data purposes only, and they are not part of the eligibility. The state likes to know afterwards, how was the money spent? Who took the money? What is the impact? That is what those questions are about. You are not required to have employees to be eligible for this grant. When looking at the financial questions, 2019 is the magic year here, and that is true whether you are operating on a calendar year or a fiscal year. What you want to do is look to your 2019 990. That is the 990 that the physical form itself has the number 2019 on it. If you're a calendar year, it's all very clear. If you're a fiscal year, you have a specific 990 that is your 2019 990, regardless of what your fiscal year is. That's what you want to look for all of the financial information. And you want to look for your total gross revenue. On your 990, go down to that total gross revenue, and that's going to give you the magic answers for the financial questions on this. This includes one of the limitations on this grant is that you have to be under $2 million in total gross revenue in 2019 in order to qualify. This is a small business grant, and that is part of the definition of a small business. So when you need to be under $2 million is on that 2019 Form 990. Doesn't matter what your budget is today, doesn't matter what your budget was last year. What is important is the total gross revenue from 2019. Another important thing to keep in mind is you have to have been in existence prior to June 1st of 2019. You're not required to charge admission for your performances. We already talked about that there's a list of eligible expenses. There is not a specific timeline for this grant. Like with SBOG and some other grants, you have or your California Arts Council grant, you have, a year or some specific amount of time to spend the grant. That is not the case for this grant. There is also not going to be a budget where you fill in, this is how I'm going to spend the money. There are specific ways and only certain things you can spend the money on. There is not a timeline for when you have to spend the money. Keep in mind that though there is no formal reporting process for this or a closeout process for the grant, the state always has the option to check on individual grant recipients. Make sure that you keep receipts and clear records of how you spend the grant funds in case you are ever requested that information by the state. This grant, as opposed to some of the earlier grants that have been happening through industry, is being reviewed on a first come, first served basis, or what Jan wisely likes to call a rolling process. So instead of saying, okay, we're going to accept applications from July 13th until August 13th, and then we're going to start reviewing them all, they will begin reviewing the applications as they come in. This does not mean, however, that grant one that comes in the door as an application is going to be grant one that goes out the door as funding. Each of these grants has a few different things that has to be verified and they have to be reviewed. There will be multiple reviewers working on them at the same time. So they're going to be done on a rolling basis, but it's not going to be exactly one for one. Another important thing to keep in mind is this is a brand new program. It is a brand new thing for a program administered by Cal OSBA to be accepting fiscal sponsor applications. It's a wonderful thing. It's something that was advocated hard for by both Cal Nonprofits and Californians for the Arts, but it also is a new thing. And with new things, there are some bumps in the road. So there are some final details that are still being worked out, and you should anticipate as we begin the grant program, Lindustry is going to have to sort some things out. So it's going to take a little bit of time, probably once the applications open, to get things started. Do not anticipate the fact that you've applied on June 13th, you're not going to have your money on June 15th. It's going to take a little while. So let's all take a deep breath and know that going in. Okay, moving on. All right, so as I said, the eligibility for this is that you have to be a nonprofit performing arts organization. The way that the state is determining the definition of nonprofit performing arts organization is by using something called your NAICS code. As nonprofits, many of you may not be familiar with your NAICS codes unless you have gone through some of the earlier grant programs. These 4 NAICS codes that are listed here are the eligible NAICS codes for this application. Now let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about practically how that works. All right, so the NAICS codes, in some cases, not-for-profits do include the NAICS codes on their 990. Most do not, because it is not a required entry. So for the not-for-profits to do a parallel to these NAICS codes, there is a code called the NTEE code. The way that you find what your NTEE code is, the quickest and easiest, this is a code that is assigned by the IRS when you originally get your not-for-profit status. So there's a wonderful website called GuideStar where you can for free go and register and look up your individual not-for-profit organization, and you will see there a listing of your NTEE codes. There can be up to 3 NTEE codes there. So what Lindustry has done and the state has done is come up with, for NAICS code for theater 711.11.0, here is a list of the NTE codes that would fall under that NAICS code. Same for each of the NAICS codes that are eligible for this grant. So what you need to do, go find your NTE code and then look back. We'll talk about the fiscal sponsors in just a second and how that impacts. On the application itself, you're going to select one of these 4 NAICS codes prior to the portal opening, prior to when you sit down to do this, do the research, find out what your NTE code is, because everything in these applications has to be verified. So it's not simply, oh, I'm a theater company, I know I fall under the theater NAICS code, so that's what I'll put down. Industry has to be able to verify things. The way they are verifying these NTE codes is by going to GuideStar and looking up what is listed there. So you want to go and you want to look, and if the NTE code that is listed there doesn't make sense to you, then you can contact GuideStar and work on getting that adjusted, and email me directly if that is the case, and we can help you through what you need to do in that case. All right, let's move on. As we talked about, you can be either a 501c3 and apply for this organization, or you can apply as a fiscal sponsor for fiscally sponsored organizations. For the NTE code and the NAICS code, I'm sorry, if you are applying for a fiscally sponsored organization, if you're the fiscal sponsor, you're applying for the fiscally sponsored organization, then your NAICS code as the fiscal sponsor does not have to fall into one of these categories. They will, if your NAICS code does not, then Lindustry is going to work with you to establish that in fact your fiscally sponsored organization is an eligible nonprofit performing arts organization. Unfortunately, as I said, this is a new program. I can't tell you exactly right now what that process is going to be. We are working to get that established and to get that information out. But no, if you are applying as a fiscal sponsor for the fiscally sponsored organization, then you do not have to fall into one of these NAICS codes. Now, the other thing that is true for fiscal sponsors is you can apply on your own if you do fall into one of these NAICS codes. So if I'm fiscal sponsor A and I happen to be 711 110, then I can apply for myself, and I'm under $2 million. Then I can apply for myself for a grant, as well as a grant for my fiscally sponsored organizations. Each one of those is an individual and separate grant application. You, as the fiscal sponsor, will complete all of those applications. You complete one for yourself if you qualify, and you will be the completer for all of the fiscally sponsored organizations you might represent. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so fiscal sponsors, I think I've just covered all of this information. There is not a limit on the number of fiscally sponsored organizations that you can submit applications for. But you do have to have a fiscal sponsor agreement in place with each organization that you sponsor. That agreement has to have been in place since June 1st, 2019. This is how they will establish that not only was the fiscal sponsor in existence June 1st of 2019, which remember is one of the eligibility requirements, but it is also a way to establish that the fiscally sponsored entity has been in existence since that time. Okay, let's go. All right, so these are the grant levels. If your 2019 gross revenue was between $1,000 and $100,000, your grant will be, if it is awarded, $25,000. If you're between $100,001 to $1 million, the grant amount is $50,000. $1,001 to $2 million, the grant amount is $75,000. There will not be partial amounts. These amounts you will either be deemed to be eligible, awarded a grant, this is the amount it will be, or you won't. Again, your 2019 Form 990 total gross revenue is where you want to look to figure out which of these levels your grant would be. Know this again before you sit down to apply, because you're going to be asked on the application. Next. All right, one other note on this. If you are a small organization and not required to complete the 990 or 990 EZ, if you are filing the 990N, the postcard, then you want to have your RRF1, which is the form that you have to file with the state each year, available. And that is what you will submit in addition, instead of the 2019 990. The reason being, the postcard does not include any financial information. The RRF1 that you file with the state does. And so that is what will be used to verify your financials. You cannot verify the financials with anything other than the 990s. So it can't be your audited financial statement. It's not a profit and loss statement. It has to be the 990, or in the case of those that file a 990N, the RRF1. Okay, moving on. All right, these are the required documents that you will need. Sit down, look at these. Note that under proof of business organization, you don't need all of those, you need one of those. I'm not going to go through these line by line. There is information here on the size of the PDFs, naming for it. Look at this, be prepared with these documents beforehand, and follow the instructions that they give you. The first one here is an application certification. You can download that beforehand, fill it out, sign it. You can either print it out, sign it, scan it, and attach it as a PDF, or you can use a digital signature. Either one is acceptable. It's your personal preference. Again, these are all things that you can do in preparation. You do not have to do these July 13th at 9 o'clock. Next. All right, so some tips for applying. This is just talking again about the sorting out your NAICS code. So let's go on. All right, one of the big places that confusion comes up with these grants is the signer. In not-for-profits, as we all know, in many cases, an officer of the organization is not the one that completes grants. The only person that can be the signer, the only people that can be the signer for these grants is someone who is an officer listed on the statement of information for your organization. For the fiscal sponsor, we're talking about the fiscal sponsor now. We're not talking about the fiscally sponsored entity. You as the fiscal sponsor are going to be in charge of this grant. You are the responsible party accepting the money. Therefore, the signer is someone who is on your statement of information. For an individual not-for-profit, again, it's someone who's on your statement of information. Look it up. Go now and figure out who that is. Logistically, for many not-for-profits, the person who is a signer is not probably the person who has the information to fill out the full application, and also to be the point person as Lindustry moves through your application and has questions and stuff. That is probably going to be one of your staff members, as opposed to, say, for example, your board president. So you want to strategize before you start this, because the signer is the person whose government ID you are going to submit. One of the things that we have to remember is, unfortunately, we live in a world where a lot of fraud takes place. And so Lindustry and the state have to do everything they possibly can to make sure these funds are going to the people that actually deserve them, and not people who are trying to fraudulently apply. That means there's some identification that has to happen. All of us are concerned in life about identity theft. And we come into kind of an uncomfortable position with some of these grants, balancing individuals' concerns about identity theft and personal information, and the states need to verify. So we got to kind of work together. So one of the things that you're going to have to do as part of this application is supply a government ID, copy of the front, copy of the back. There's a list in the application guides of what those potential IDs are. You're going to upload that as part of the grant process, as part of the application process. You also are then going to do a digital verification that the person sitting in front of the computer is the same person that is represented on that government ID. So when you sit down to fill out this application, the easiest, most effective thing is if you are not a signer on the statement of information, then that you sit down as a pair and have the person from the organization that has all the pertinent information, and then have the person who's going to be the signer. Have them both sit there together, go through this process. If there are no computer glitches and you prepare yourself ahead, this should take less than an hour. But you are literally going to have the signer look into the camera, and they're going to record a picture of that person. You cannot have multiple people logged in at the same time. So it's not really effective to have one person somewhere else and one person there. So the easiest thing is if you're both there together at the same time. The other thing to remember is when you first set up the portal, it's going to have you set up a login, and there's going to be an email address and a phone. That phone number needs to be a textable number, so it needs to be a cell phone so that it can receive text codes, because every time you log into the portal, it's going to send a code to that cell phone number, and that's the only way you can get into the portal. So this needs to be a cell phone that is easily accessible and monitored by whoever is going to be responsible for communicating with Lindustry and overseeing the processing of this grant. Every grant application, at some point, Lindustry is going to be contacting you. They're going to be verifying information. They're going to be asking you for new information. So, critical. The phone number is not somebody that's going to be taking a 6-month cruise, not somebody that is the board president but is not involved on a day-to-day basis. Make sure that phone number is well thought out, as well as the email address. Those are going to be your 2 points of communication. During the grant application, it's going to ask you a few times for somebody's preferred number. Always use this same cell phone number. It will cut down a lot of confusion later on. Okay, next. So read this. There are certain email accounts that the Lindustry system does not like, for example, info at. So read this, prepare yourself, make sure that you have a good email and cell phone before you sit down at the application. Next. Okay. This is telling you some tips on preparing the document. Let's go on to the next page. This is pretty basic logic sense. They have to read these documents in order to evaluate your grant. When you scan them, make sure that it's legible. Open it up beforehand. Look at it. Can you read the documents? Use a scanner or a scanner app. Don't take a picture of this with your phone. Phone pictures of documents are very inconsistent, and sometimes on the reading end can be extremely difficult to interpret. Read the instructions, label your documents clearly, make it easy for the person reviewing your grant to be able to get the information they need. Okay, next. There are some very specific things about making it easier for you to apply for your grant. Read this. It talks to you about cleaning your cache, using incognito mode, and disabling your pop blocker. Don't try it and then see if you have a problem. This will make your life easier when you are applying. It's a computer application. There's going to be lots of people going in from lots of different places. Lindustry has found, their technical support has found, If you do these things, it makes your life easier. As you follow through the next pages, there is detailed step-by-step instructions on how to do each of these three things. Read them, follow them, love them. Okay, next. Yep, keep going. You all are going to come back later and read these. We're not reading them together. Keep going. Disable your pop. Yes. All right. Preparation before you apply. Do not wait till July 13th to start thinking about this. You need your 2019 990, but you also need to know your 2020 total revenue that will be represented on your 2020 990. You will not be asked during the application to upload it, but they are going to ask you for your total revenue in 2020. The questions about 2020 are a combination of one, data gathering, but also more importantly, one of the requirements for the grant is that you be in operation. That is why they are asking for additional financial information besides just the 990. They need to prove and establish that you are still operating. Figure out your NAICS code situation before you sit down. I want you all to read these at a later date. I'm not going to reread them for you because we've already gone over them, but this is a big one. Part of the application process is a bank verification process that is through a system called PLAD. You have to have your bank information ready to register with PLAD, but one of the things that you have to have is the login and password for signing into the online banking for your organization. Not just the routing number and account number. You specifically need the login that is used to sign into online banking for your organization. Also, if your organization has multiple accounts, you'll need to know which account you want to use to ultimately have the money deposited into if you are granted. This process does not happen at the end once you've been granted. It is part of the application process. You cannot submit your application until you go through this process. There are a few banks that do not function with the PLAD system. If you have been through this with Lindustry before, you already know this. There are ways that Lindustry can go ahead and verify you and do the banking verification, even if you don't work, even if the PLAD doesn't work. If you know you had a problem, one of the things that in the past, or just to prepare yourself, just in case you do, if they can't connect you through PLAD, then you're going to be asked to update or to submit your 2 most recent monthly bank statements for the account that you are connected to. It's a good idea to go ahead and have PDFs of those ready in case you need them. Because once again, you have to do this banking thing before your application can be submitted. So don't put yourself in the situation of, oh, I want to submit, but I have to go, to the accountant or whoever and get the bank statements. In most cases, you will not need the RRF one, but as I said, for those filing the 990 NE, you will need that. So have that one ready with you. Okay, let's go to the next. The application process. Before we start into this, one more thing that I want to tell everybody in terms of the preparing. One of the things that Lindustry has to verify is that you are in good standing with the state, that you're in good standing with both the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. So the Department of Justice has the Registry of Charitable Trusts, and you also have the Statement of Information and a status with the Secretary of State. Now, before the application opens, go and check your status on both of these things. Unfortunately, the department, both of these organizations are sometimes get behind in putting out notifications. You may have a delinquency or some issue with either the Department of Justice or the Secretary of State and not even be aware of it. There will be resources on the Californians for the Arts website as to how you can look these things up if you don't know how, but go look at them, find them. Oh, thank you, Zuriel. And make sure you're in good standing in both places. There are ways to get your standing cleaned up if there's a problem, but they take time. So don't wait until July 13th at 9 a.m. to find that out. Okay, so just a few things on the physical application process, and then I'm going to stop so that we can cover questions. When you go in, thank you. When you go into the portal, the first thing that you have to do is register. If you have applied for a Lindustry grant in the past, you do have to register again. It is a new registration for each unique different grant program. If you are able to use the same email address, but you do need to set up a new login. Again, remember what we said before, there's going to be a confirmation code. Make sure you use a cell phone number where you can get that confirmation code. Okay, next. And again, for a fiscally sponsored application, the person who's logging in and doing this is the fiscal sponsor. All right, now there are two separate applications. There's one application if you are a standalone not-for-profit applying for yourself, and there is a second if you are a fiscal sponsor applying on behalf of a fiscally sponsored organization. When the process starts, make sure you check the right one. And as we've said before, you can apply on your own behalf as a fiscal sponsor, and you can apply for multiple fiscally sponsored organizations as long as there's, everything is correct in terms of eligibility, but each one is its own unique application. We've been told that you can use the same login for the multiples if you're in the fiscal sponsor situation, but you do have to complete an application for each one. Next. I think we have talked about all of these things to keep in mind. Reread this later. Okay, so go on. So as I mentioned before, for each phase of the application, this guide gives you this information. This is what's going to be asked for. What's on the other side of the screen is not, it's just an image. So you can't actually go in and physically start filling it out, but you can see every single screen you're going to see during the application process. There's no reason that you can't be fully prepared. They're going to list everything out here. When you're applying as a fiscal sponsor for a fiscally sponsored organization, pay attention to, are they asking for information about your organization, or are they asking for information about the sponsee, the entity that you are supporting? As I mentioned before, dealing in this process with fiscally sponsored organizations is a new thing, and there are a few of the logistics that are still being worked out. One of those is, when the portal was originally set up, you will see that it talks about an STD 2013 agreement. You are not required to complete and upload this agreement at the beginning of the process. There was a confusion. This has been straightened out, but the way that computers work, it is too late at this point to change the question in the portal. So when you get to the upload documents portion and it asks for the STD 2013, create a PDF of a blank page if you want and upload it there. The application will not let you complete if you do not upload something in that place. But do not be concerned. You do not have to have an STD 213 completed at the application point. Can you go forward another slide? So this is, again, just information about your fiscal sponsor organization. Now go one more. Now, they're going to ask about the fiscally sponsored nonprofit. Because, as we all know, different fiscally sponsored organizations are at different levels. So there are some things that are being asked for here that your fiscally sponsored organization may not yet have. If they don't have it, use the fiscal sponsors. If, for example, the fiscally sponsored project does not yet have an EIN, use the fiscal sponsors. And the same for these other questions. As I mentioned before, these questions about creating jobs, full-time jobs, these are not part of the evaluation for the grant. These are data gathering questions. Okay, one more. These questions sometimes will say women owned, talk about owner. Just take a deep breath. Everybody knows that not-for-profits don't have owners. Think of that as woman-led, and you can use for these either your leader of your organization or the board. Define it for yourself. Again, these are for data gathering. The NAICS of the sponsee. If the fiscally sponsored organization is probably not going to have a NAICS or an NTE. So if you as the sponsor have one of the eligible NTE codes, fill that in for now. And if you don't, email me and we will figure out what you should fill in. In total honesty and candor, this is one of the things that the state is still figuring out, is how they're going to do this, since the fiscally sponsored organizations usually don't have that piece of information. Cards on the table. Okay, next. Keep going. Okay, so persona is the company basically that is going to do that visual verification that we talked about before. Next. This is the PLAD information that we talked about before. If you can't complete the PLAD, then it will give you instructions as you go through, and Lindustry will work with you through other methods to verify your bank. Okay, next. This is where you're going to upload the documents. If you're trying to upload a document and for some reason the system hates you and will not upload a document, create a PDF, explain what's happening, and upload that instead of document. Don't just leave the space blank. If there's something weird about your document that you think, it would be easier to understand if you put in a note, put that in with your PDF and submit it all as one document. All right, move on. Okay, you are allowed to stop at any point, save, and come back later. So you don't have to sit down and do the entire thing all at once. Next. At the end, before you do your application, go back and review everything. It will tell you everything's ready, and then you can edit each individual section. Take a moment, look at everything, make sure you've answered everything how you want. Once you submit, it becomes much more difficult to get back in because you have to contact Lindustry, and they have to reopen the portal for you to get back in. So you can, but it's easier if you do it before you review. Also, there is not an option to print the entire application. So if you want to keep a record of what you entered before you submit, do a screen capture, do a print, whatever, of each portion of the application, because you will not have the option to print the whole thing. Next. Okay, so this section would just go through exactly what we just did for the individual not-for-profits. But what I want to do now is let's jump in and hit any of the questions that maybe we haven't been able to do or would be better done verbally. And then we'll close up with giving you the contact information again. Jan, what should we talk about?
Well, let's see. Patricia and I and other presenters have now answered a total of 68 questions in writing in the Q&A box. So we're
beautiful.
Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. But a couple that I think keep coming up over and over again. One is, can you use the funds to pay for contractors, or is it just for W-2 employees?
Yes, you can use the funds to pay for contractors. We're not going to go into definitions of contractors and all of that, but if you look at that list of eligible expenses, there is nothing that requires it is only spent on employees. You will notice that one of the last items on the list is other operating expenses. So do not use the funds to buy yourself a car or take a vacation to Hawaii. You can, however, use it for legitimate operating expenses for your not-for-profit.
You can use it to buy a car for Terry or for me, though, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, especially if it's like a convertible. And so there are also a number of questions about the question about having to sign the form. Can you log, if the other person is in a different location, can you log out and then have that person log in?
Yes.
You can.
You cannot be in it simultaneously, but yes, you can log out. Now, you're going to have to be in communication
Right.
because you're going to have the code and do all of that. So yes.
Okay.
And one more thing about that persona.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. It's a camera trying to take a picture and verify. So it's going to take a little bit of time. They're a little glitchy. I was testing it at my house one night and I have a lot of clocks on the back of the wall and it kept thinking I had too many people in the picture. So think about your location, take a deep breath, know that's going to be frustrating, but just keep turning your face and it will eventually work. Next.
And then also what people are also asking, will the information in the chat and in the Q&A be also part of what you send afterwards?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Terry. Okay, that's it for the unanswered questions as far as I can see.
Wow. Okay. So is there
now up to 70? So if you have a specific question, please write it in the Q&A. We've now answered 70 in the Q&A box. So
you are fabulous.
this is answering most of them. Just I'm only doing a few. So
no, there is no minimum number of employees.
right.
Does the website require disabling VPN to process? I don't know, Gordon. That's one that we will find out. Patrice, do any of you from industry know that? When can we expect to receive the funds? Sometime after July 13th. Realistically, I would not expect receiving them until early to mid-August at the earliest. They have, everything takes more time when you're first doing it. And these applications do take some handling. You have to make sure the bank, because checks are not issued. Your money will come in a direct deposit. So it takes a little bit of time. So if you have not heard and you do not know anything by July 30th, do not panic. Do not budget so that you're expecting to spend this money August 1st. Criteria for funding, what is it? The eligibility are the financial, you have to be under $2 million and you have to fall into one of those NAICS codes that is discussed. Emily, if you still want to talk more about that specifically, email me and we can talk one-on-one. Please answer doubt about the right 990. There's a tremendous amount of confusion always about fiscal year. If you look at the 990 physical form itself, up in the corner, there is a number, not a number that you fill in, but a number that the IRS prints on there. So there is a physical 990 for 2019. That is the one that you want. Yes, Dan.
Terry, yes, I'm sorry to say that I have spent many years of my life studying the 990. The big number in the upper right-hand corner, okay, that's actually the year that version of Form 990 was published. It is okay. So for example, your form is likely to say 2018 in big letters because that's the version, that's the 2018 version of Form 990. So then later, if you go down just a little tiny bit, then it says this is for the year ending and it says 20 blank. So your big number might say 2018, but the little number that you yourself filled in is going to say for the year ending 2019. So right now, if you're filling out this year's 990, you're probably going to be filling out one that says 2021 because they revised the form in 2021.
All right, because there are also forms that say specifically 2019. So let's get some clarity on this, and we will post it to the website. The important thing is, what is your 2019 fiscal year?
Right.
Talk to your accountant, ask your accountant, what is your 2019 fiscal year?
Right.
That's what you want. My understanding is that your 2019 fiscal year is usually the fiscal year that starts in 2019. And so therefore it would end in 2020. That's what I've been told so it would be the one that starts in 2019 and ends in 2020 is your 2019 fiscal year, but we will clarify this. Can we state we have no employees to qualify? The number of employees you have is not an eligibility criteria. Putting 0 employees in the data information will not disqualify you. Can we assume this documentation will work? Marcella, why don't you email me? That's kind of an open-ended question. I don't want to say yes. I don't see anything in what you're typing here that would be a problem. What document? It's the document for this that you want to look at is called the Statement of Information. You file it every 2 years with the Secretary of State, and it includes the officers of your organization.
Mhm.
The legal sign off on this application needs to be an officer of your organization. Now, one of the things that causes some confusion is another thing that's on the Statement of Information is an agent that is eligible to accept basically subpoena. That person may or may not be an officer.
Right.
So make sure, just because you're an agent doesn't make you an officer. The fact that you're an agent doesn't mean you can't sign, but what you want to do is determine who is an officer, because the officer needs to be the signer, which needs to be the government ID person, which needs to be somebody who you are going to be able to access both at the beginning of the process and at the end when doing a DocuSign to sign off for the final grant. Can the
Carrie,
fiscal
go ahead. No, finish that one. I have one other important one.
Sure. Can the fiscal sponsor have gross receipts over $2 million? Yes, provided that they are applying for a fiscally sponsored organization.
Mhm.
If you want to apply for yourself
Mhm.
as the fiscal sponsor, then you have to be under $2 million. Yes, Jan.
So we have a good question from Jennifer Caballero at the California Association of Museums, and combining with a couple of other questions. So for example, there are museums that often have performing arts programs, right? So they bring in musicians, for example, or dancers or other performing arts. So do they need to have an NTE code changed or added that includes that? Or how do they go ahead and apply for that?
The way that they would apply is it's going to be evaluated based on your NTE codes. So you want to look at that NTE code and make sure it accurately reflects your programming, because that's what the eligibility is going to be based on. Remember, you can have up to 3 NTE codes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a museum and that's the NTE code, but you're also do performing arts and are you know, have eligibility based on that, then make sure you have an NTE code that reflects those activities also.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I talked to GuideStar, by the way, 2 weeks ago, and I asked them specifically about their process, and they're telling me that it's only taking about 2 working days for them to change NTE codes. So I'm hoping that that's true, but that's good news for everybody who needs to change or add an NTE code.
And it's an extremely easy process. There's
Mhm.
the phone number that you call, or there's an email that you send. It's extremely easy. And it's a really good idea to go into GuideStar and look at your listing anyway to make sure information is correct, because there are some people who just have crazy off the wall NTE codes. So you want to go in and look at that. I just want to double check. What if an organization? Somebody just asked if their organization didn't start until 2020, is there a way to apply? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. One of the hard things in the eligibility for this grant is that you have to have been in existence prior to June 1st of 2019. I know it's not fair. I know it's frustrating, but there has to be a date somewhere, and that is what it is for this. So you have to have articles of incorporation or something like that established prior to June 1st. We are at 12 o'clock. I am fine to stay on for a few and answer questions, but I just want to wrap up really quickly. Thank you to everyone
I want
for
to say thanks to Terry. Can everybody type in the chat? Thanks to Terry for being so knowledgeable, so candid, so friendly, so like knowing every detail, and also for being open to the fact that for putting your email address here so that everybody can ask other questions. And I also just want to sneak this in because I know we're over time already, which is that, this program didn't just happen. It happened because organizations like Californians for the Arts and Cal Nonprofits advocated for it. So it's a reason to keep up advocating, so there'll be more programs like this.
thank you. Okay, so just so that we're sure, you've got my email address there. The Lindustry Call Center is there. The California for the Arts website program page is there. That's where we will post recordings, post the slide deck, post the Q&A. And the Californian Nonprofit Performing Arts Organization, we have too many Californians here. Website is also there, and go there, download the application guide. I just want to blast through the end here and make sure I've hit. Katie, I will include the directions in the Q&A about how you can fix your NTE code if it is inaccurate. Can a fiscal sponsor work with a nonprofit that was not established prior to 2019? No, because you will have to have had a relationship and a fiscal sponsor agreement in place since June 1 of 2019. Does it match? We've talked about matching your in. To put it another way, does a fiscally sponsored organization submit a separate 990? The fiscally sponsored organization, if they have a 990, there is a place where you can submit it. You are not required to have a 990 because you're not required yet to file one. So it depends on, one of the challenges with fiscally sponsored organizations is that that's a really big thing. And unlike, it's fairly easy to define, this is what a 501c3 is. There are a number of different ways and types of organizations and entities that can be fiscally sponsored. That's part of why that's going to take a little bit more specific work, hand holding. The eligibility depends on income. Why does Section 3 info guide? Again, they're asking for information about 2020 for the employee information. Doesn't have anything to do with eligibility. That's information gathering for the state. They're asking for financials for 2020 to establish that you have continued in operation. Robert, email me your fiscal sponsored. Email me your fiscally sponsored question, and let's get into that on an individual. What's the latest we should file the applications to still be in the running? Ben, that's not something we can specifically answer. It's going to open on July 13th. They're going to start processing applications. There is no way for us to know how long the money will last. So do I think you have to be in by 9:05? No, I do not. Would I wait till August 15th? No, I would not. But there's really no way to answer that question. Are there any narrative questions? No, there are no narrative questions in this application. There is nothing about your current programming in the application. Kenneth, email me and I can help you with the statement of information issue. Can you display a 990 form? I do not have one easily. It's the tax form that not-for-profits file. If you Google 990 form, 990 tax form, you will absolutely be able to do that. If you can't find that, send me. an email. Just to clarify, the list does or does not qualify. The agent for service of process qualifies if they're an officer. The simple fact that you are the agent for service of process does not make you an officer. So if the person is an officer and the agent for service of process, then they do qualify. If they're an agent for service of process that is not an officer, then they don't. Be to disseminate until they're the funding for this grant program is $49.5 million. So that's the amount that will be disseminated. Our core sponsor is 5 high school funds we gather from. On the chorus question, the I would email me, but the issue with like a chorus would be, do you file your own separate 990s? Are you your own separate not-for-profit, or are you part of the school system? Because if you're part of the school system, then you won't have your own individual 990. You won't be under $2 million. So email me and we can help you sort that out. Usha, there's no way that I can guarantee. I do not anticipate that by the 16th, all the funds would be expended, but I certainly can't guarantee that. There maybe there's somebody else in your organization that could do it. But other than that, that's really a decision you'll have to make. Ben, if you have questions when you're filling out the application, you can call industry or you can email me directly. On July 13th, I was supposed to be on an airplane flying back from a conference, and I have delayed my return so I can be at my computer on Wednesday answering email questions. I look forward to hearing from all of you. What is the total amount? We did that. Okay, I think we have hit everything in the chat.
And 94 questions have been answered in writing, the Q&A
Look
box.
at you.
No, that's Patrice mostly. You should give a shout out to
Yay to Patrice. So in terms of the Q&A, what I will do is I will take this, make it a Word document. I will be honest, when the same question is asked 4 different times, we'll combine those into one. We will include the answers that have been provided here, and anything where there is not a written answer here, we will put one in so that you can use it. The same thing was done in the yesterday's chat and is up online already. One of the things that we didn't say at all that something in the chat is reminding me that I forgot to mention is this is a separate grant program from the California Relief Program or the California Venues Program. The fact that you either received or were declined for one of those has no bearing on this program. There also is no financial combination. For example, if you applied for the California Venues, then your California Relief Grant was taken out of your California Venues. That is not the case for this grant. This is a completely standalone. It is not COVID relief. It is for workforce development. So the previous grant programs have no bearing on this. If you got one, that doesn't mean you'll get this. If you didn't get one, that doesn't impact things either. We do file every year on it. Okay. Is there anything else? It is 12:09. I want to make sure that we don't send anybody away frustrated that they weren't heard. So raise your hand because it'll show us in participants whose hands are raised. Raise your hand if you have anything last minute you want to ask before we close things out. Oh, there are 4, there are 5. Oh my goodness. Okay. So
there's still 59 unanswered questions also in the Q&A box.
Oh, okay. So there are 59 unanswered questions. Okay. Then what we'll do, we don't have time to hit 59. Is there a way to, can each of you that has your hand still raised, just put your question in chat and we will hit them, as well as I will do all of the 59. What was the type of agent who can be assigned? Terry mentioned too. Don't worry about the agent. Look at the statement of information and look for the officers. Don't get yourself distracted with the agent. Forget that the agent is listed on there. That's a completely different thing. Worry about is the signer an officer on your statement of information. I'm still on question how we determine whether our NTE code qualifies as one of the allowable NAICS codes. Rebecca emailed me. There's a chart that's in this slide deck here that we showed that says this list of NTE codes, you want to fill in this NAICS code on the application. And so what you want to do is find your NTE code, go to that chart and look at which NAICS code you fall under. I think there seems to be a lull. Will we be notified when the portal is open? No, Mary or Marty, what you're going to want to do is go to the California Nonprofit Performing Arts Grant website, where you will have already gone to look at the application guide and everything beforehand. July 13th, 9 o'clock in the morning, you're going to go to that website and it's going to give you the option to sign into the portal by first setting up your account. The status and type of employee, Josephine, the status and type of employees that you do or do not have is not an eligibility factor for this grant. You need to be under $2 million and you need to be a not-for-profit and or fiscally sponsored organization, and you need to have the performing arts eligibility based on the NAICS and NTE. Employees are not a factor. I realize that's extremely confusing when we say that it is a workforce development grant, but that is the reality. So do not worry about do not worry about your employee situation that fall under more than one NAICS number. That is fine, Michael. Just pick the one that you feel best represents your organization, because there is a lot of overlap between MI Music and my theater. So pick the one that best matches you. I checked that. I do not have the list immediately in front of me. Check the chart and you can email me and I can tell you. I don't want to say something having not. Oh, A99 is. I multitask. Yes, A99 is one of the listed NTE codes. Where do we find this recording? The email address that's on the website right now, California for the Arts website program page. It won't be there immediately because obviously we have to upload and do all of those things. But by tomorrow morning, the recording of this will be on the website, and you will also receive an email with follow-up information, including the link to that.
Terry, here's a question I haven't heard before. So
Sure.
can the fiscal sponsor get administrative costs like 10 or 15% or whatever they typically charge for the grant, or is it restricted to only being using for workforce?
What I would say, and I will clarify this with Lindustry and Patrice jump in, I would say as once the money, I would say it can be treated like any other grant that the fiscal sponsor would receive, because for the fiscally sponsored organization, the payment of said administrative fee would be an ordinary operating expense for the fiscally sponsored organization. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to take your normal administrative fees as outlined in your agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, all of you, for coming, and good luck on the grant. Please go through ahead of time and look look through all of the applications, figure out what your questions are. It's much easier for me to answer them in the next week than it will be Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock when everybody's in panic. Prepare, get yourself ready, and hopefully, if you are eligible, we will get you these monies because Lord knows we all need them right now. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Terry.
Have a great day.
Patrice, Linda Street. Bye, everybody.
Bye.